accountability section. Now, this is something that's very, very interesting because when you accept accountability for what you have and what you don't have and your circumstance and your situation, you can take control of your life. Because if you're designing your life, being intentional about it, then you're consciously, intentionally creating things. And you have to be able to have accountability for the things that are in your life, or else you can't consciously, intentionally create them. Because if you didn't create the things that you currently have, then you're now a victim to it, and you have no control. And so you can't control and you can't create the rest of it. So you need to accept your accountability in the current situation. This is something that's very, very important. I want you to eliminate the word fault from your vocabulary. Accountability is not about fault. If we are talking about a car accident and you're talking to a police officer, then you can talk about fault. Any other circumstance, you're not going to talk about fault. You can talk about accountability, what you can control. So this is a new thing for your brain. It really is. Getting rid of the word fault. And you're going to focus on what you can control and how you're showing up. Because it just matters so much, especially in the context of business. Because when you can take accountability for where you're at, you can really, really move the needle moving forward. So go to your worksheet. You have a T right here on the left-hand side. We're going to talk about victimhood, okay? Now, let me be very, very clear that when I talk about victimhood, I am not talking about anything to do with assault or abuse or anything like that. As a completely different situation. The victimhood that I'm talking about is when you think that like a situation, if only it were different, then I could be happy. If only it were different, then I could be successful. If only she hadn't said that or done that, whatever. This is you not being in control. It's you being a victim. It's an energy draining emotion to experience and to have other people be in your space about. So the thing about victimhood is that it carries with it a lot of characteristics, a lot of energies, a lot of emotions. And the vast majority of them are under an umbrella that I call unconscious reaction. So if you are a victim, then you are being an unconscious reactor. Now, unconscious just means subconscious, because you're not consciously doing it. Our beliefs determine a lot of this. Our worldview determines a lot of this. The filter that we run everything through determines a lot of this. And then we're just reacting to every situation instead of being proactive. Have you ever felt like you're behind on a lot of things? Have you ever felt like you just are feeling stuck? It's because you're reactive to so many things and you're a victim to your own excuses and to your own limitations. So we're going to go through this process. Normally when I do this, I do it with somebody, like in person or with a group of people. In fact, there's a video that's part of this module that is a video of me doing a live training on this in front of about 100 people on this principle, on this concept of accountability. And I want you to watch it or listen to it so you can get clarity around how a group of people interacts with this. And you can do this exercise after watching it be done with a group of people. Or you could just do this. It's up to you. There's just some additional material for you. So now I'm going to list a lot of the characteristics and qualities that come with victimhood. So think of a person. It could be you from the past. It could be somebody that you know right now, just in your life, who is always being a victim to circumstance. It's a reality. There's a lot of people that show up like this. Now, spoiler alert, you do this too. And so do I. But the awareness of it is what is going to allow us to shift it. But think of this person. Think of a person that shows up as a victim, unconsciously reacting to things. And we're going to list some characteristics, qualities, emotions, behaviors that they exhibit in that moment of victimhood. So I'm going to do this here, and you can think of your own and add other ones to your own list. So go ahead and do that. here's just a short list. You can add some other ones. Think about how you have shown up in the past. People, they have a lot of doubt. They end up being lonely because they isolate themselves. They blame everybody for everything. Nothing's their fault, right? And it's all about fault, right? Somebody else's fault. And then if they feel like, oh shoot, that was my fault, then they feel, oh, like just blaming and like judgy. They're really, yeah, I need to write that one. They judge. They're very judgmental, especially on themselves, okay? They're an energy suck. They're an energy vampire. It's hard to be around them. You feel drained after they leave. They complain about a lot of things. They're sad, depressed. You can't count on them. They're flaky, critical of others, and they're always stuck. Can't move forward. It's always somebody else's fault. This is just a short list. There's a lot of things that go into this, right? So add some of your own to this. I want you to think of a time in your life where you have felt like a victim. Don't judge yourself for it. Just think about it. You maybe got screwed over, you maybe just got the short end of the stick, or you weren't able to do something because of something else and you felt like you were wronged. I'm not even kidding you. It felt like you were wronged, okay? So think about this story, and I want you to write it down. But I want you to write this story down from the victim standpoint. Here's my story. This is a true story. Radiohead is my favorite band. I love Radiohead. Long time ago, they were touring, and the closest that they were coming in the States to me, I live in Idaho, closest they were coming to me was LA. It's a 15-hour drive. And me and my friend, who we didn't have any money, we were these college kids, we bought into this poor college kid mentality, and so I really didn't have any money. Tickets were $100. And he told me that he would buy the tickets, and then I would, I'd pay him back, and then we'd go down to the show. And I was so excited about this. Me and him listened to Radiohead all the time. We talked about Radiohead. It was just like this really, really bonding thing for us. And I was excited about it. And then about, 3 days before we were going to drive down to the show, I called him, and I was just planning things with him. And and he said, hey, Preston, I actually sold your ticket. And I was like, you sold my ticket? Like, I was crushed. I could not believe it. Why would you do that? And he said, because I didn't have enough money for gas to go down there, and so I just sold it, and so I could afford gas and to go down to the show. And I was just like blown away at why he would do this to me. I felt wronged. I felt like he was just like ruining my life because he was selling my ticket. It wasn't even his to sell. And it was so frustrating to me. And so I was a victim, right? So think about that story. I blamed him, I judged him, I felt isolated, I complained about the situation, I definitely was sad about it, and I was critical of him, and I was definitely stuck in Idaho. That is a victim story. So I want you to pause this and write down your victim story. It's probably a story that you've told other people, or you've told in your head, and you've run through all the scenario and what happened and why this and all this different stuff, and you get frustrated with it. Maybe while you're showering, you're just like, I can't believe they did that. You tell yourself this story, and you've told it to other people. You probably rehearsed it. It could be any situation. I want you to really tell it from the victim story, from the victim's side, and get into it. Go ahead and write it down now. Okay, now, how's that feel, right? Sometimes it feels good to be the victim. Why? Because you get to be off the hook. I admit it. Sometimes it feels good to feel like, oh yeah, that was not my fault. I was a victim. Now we're going to shift gears. You're clear on what your victim story is, and now we're going to go to the other side. Now, what's the opposite of an unconscious reactor? Somebody who doesn't live in victimhood? It is a conscious creator. Now, a conscious creator is what you are now. You are consciously, intentionally designing and creating your life, your business, your relationships, and your day. And it's a beautiful state to be in. So think of somebody who's a conscious creator. Somebody in your life, somebody that you admire, somebody you look up to. Maybe it's somebody you follow on social media or listen to, or you watch their stuff, or somebody like a really good friend or a mentor or a parent, like somebody who is in your life. You can think of those people. Those type of people is who I want to be, who I want to be like, and they're consciously creating and designing their life. What are the characteristics and qualities that somebody like that has? Go ahead and list them. Often it's just the opposite of these things, really. So you can add things to your own list as well. I want you to add other things that you have thought of. But these people are intentional. They're surrounded with love because they start with themselves, self-love. In fact, I need to write that down. Self-love. They're definitely accountable. They're very, very brave. They're courageous. They do new things, and they really don't make it mean anything about them. They're inspiring. They talk positive. They're happy. Definitely dependable. You can depend on these people for sure. They build other people up, and they don't make somebody else's win mean that they have lost. They have momentum. They're moving. They're just growing, and they're very thoughtful. They think things through, and they think about other people. And they're careful about how they approach things, but they're still willing to take risks. Okay? These are conscious creators. In fact, I'm going to write risk. They're willing to take risk too. Now, one of the main things that I really want you to get from this is right here. The core of somebody who is an unconscious reactor is blaming. And the core of somebody who is a conscious creator is that they are accountable. When you can tell the accountable version of a story. Now, this is not making it your fault. This is just telling the accountable version, meaning that you're able to account for your part. Because in any situation, there is accountability. It's not like this. It's not like there's a pie and there's that's Pac-Man, but it's not like there's 68% of person A. It's 68% person A's fault, and then 32% person B's accountability, or person B's fault. That's not how it works, because then there's always going to be like an argument in your own mind about like, well, no, it was like 67 and 33. Like, no, that is not a thing. In any situation, there is actually two circles. There's person A has 100%, and person B has 100% accountability for their role. And this is so important. So important to really, really get. A really good example of this is you're at a stoplight. You're driving 10 and 2. You drove the speed limit the whole way there. You didn't run any stop signs. And you come to a stoplight and you're obeying the traffic laws and you're there. Okay? And then all of a sudden, you get rear-ended. It's so easy to be like, it's not my fault. Now, I know I talked about fault in a traffic accident context earlier, but that's only when you're talking to the police officer, not when you're talking to your own brain. We're not talking about fault here. What is your accountability if you are in a getting rear-ended at a stoplight? Your accountability is this. You were there. That's it. Person B has a lot of accountability. They weren't paying attention. Maybe they're texting, maybe they weren't, whatever. They hit you. That's their accountability. If you weren't there, you wouldn't have gotten hit. And I know this is so frustrating, but when you focus on what you can control, you start to have power in any situation. Power to decide what you're going to react, how you're going to react, what meaning you're going to attach to it, and then what you can do moving forward. So your accountability in the traffic accident is you were there. If you had left 5 minutes earlier, you wouldn't have been there. You wouldn't have been hit. Somebody else would have been hit. If you had taken a different route, you wouldn't have been there. You wouldn't have been hit. Somebody else would have been hit, right? Like, you chose to leave at that time, you chose to take that route, and here's a question that you can always ask yourself. What am I pretending not to know? Because if you really get into it, you're pretending not to know that every single time you leave your driveway, it's a possibility that you get hit or you hit somebody else. Like, every time. Now, it happens so infrequently in our lives that we just assume that the possibilities are zero, but it is not true. If you leave the house in a car, it's a possibility. You're pretending not to know that. If you're like, "Whoa, he hit me, what the heck?" No, like, that's a possibility. And if you have an accountable conscious creator reaction, then you can take accountability, then you can actually control your emotions and your actions moving forward. Sometimes things happen in your business and in your life and your relationships. Sometimes things happen. And your accountability is what you make it mean. Your accountability is how you react to it. Sometimes you had a huge part in it, and sometimes you had a small part in it. But we're not going into percentages. You take 100% accountability for things that you can control and 0% for things that you can't. And that's really important too. You don't want to take accountability for other people's emotions. You are not responsible for other people's emotions. You can't be. You can't save everybody. So don't make yourself responsible for somebody else's happiness. It doesn't work. So now we have awareness of where the conscious creator lives. And now here's the thing. I want you to take that exact same story that you told the victim story, and you're going to tell it again. But this time you're going to tell the accountable version. And what does the accountable version look like? The accountable version is, what is my role? How did I create, cause, allow, or react to this situation? And then, what was my role? Some questions that you can ask yourself to prompt you are, what energy did I bring? What message did I send energetically? What message did I send? You can say, what was I pretending not to know? You can say, how did I show up, or how did I not show up? What did I do or what did I not do that led to this? And with what I'm pretending not to know, there's so much baggage often when we get into situations. There's filters that we run things through. There's history that we don't take into account because we look at things in an isolated situation. When there's so much, like, so many filters people can run things through, so much baggage, so many things that affect and influence circumstances and situations and behaviors. So I want you to tell that story again in the accountable version. Here's mine. Radiohead is my favorite band. I love Radiohead. Long bit ago, me and my friend were going to go to Radiohead. They were coming to LA, and we were going to drive from Idaho to go there. And it was a $100 ticket. Now, neither of us had any money. And he kindly offered to buy my ticket and lend me the money, and then I would pay him back. I didn't have the money to pay him back. And so what I did was I avoided talking about it. I didn't call him about it. When I would see him at social situations, because we were hanging out, we were friends, and like when he'd come over, I would not mention Radiohead. I wouldn't talk about the show because I felt embarrassed that I couldn't afford to pay him back right then. And I knew that he didn't have money. I knew that he was actually strapped and that it was a really, really kind of like putting him out to float my money on that ticket. I still didn't do anything about it because I was embarrassed. Then, 3 days before the show, I called him up and I said, ready to go? And he said, ooh, I sold your ticket. And I said, oh my gosh, why did you do that? I said, I couldn't afford gas. And I was like, hey man, I'm so sorry that I didn't tell you, that I even talk about it. I didn't say this, but I thought, man, I really sent the message to him that I wasn't interested because I never talked about it. So what conclusion could he obviously draw? Is that I'm not going or that I'm not interested, because he didn't want to bring it up. He was a little bit uncomfortable with bringing it up to me. Hey dude, like, I need that money. That was uncomfortable. And we were friends, and I put him in that situation. And then he let me know that he actually had sold the ticket on eBay but hadn't collected the money, because this is before like immediate PayPal on eBay was like the norm, and he hadn't collected the money yet. And so I asked him, would you cancel the sale on eBay and I can come and give you the money right now? And he did. He took the hit on his eBay rating, canceled the sale, and I came and gave him the money right then. We drove down to LA, saw the show, and it was great. Is that a different story? It's a completely different story. Why? Because it's accountable. Are there things that I left out of the first story? Yeah. I did not talk about my role, my energy, my message that I sent to him with my actions, or inactions in this case. I didn't talk about any of that. I didn't talk about my accountability. It was all about blaming because I wanted to be right. I wanted to be the victim, and I didn't want to be vulnerable. So now is your turn. Ask yourself those questions. How did I show up? How did I create this? What did I do? What did I not do? What energy did I bring? What was I pretending not to know? What was the history that allowed for this to happen? How did I react to it? What was the meaning that I attached to it? Ask yourself those questions. And I want you to tell the accountable version of the story to somebody or write it down. But this is the key. You can only talk about what you did. You can talk about their actions, but not in a blaming sense. You notice how when I told that story, I said, he told me that he had sold my ticket. I didn't judge him for it. I just talked about facts. Oh, that's another thing, is the conscious creator talks about facts. And the person who's in victimhood just talks about drama. Lots of drama. Drama is unnecessary thoughts and unnecessary emotions. So tell the factual version of the story, complete with when you say they did this, you immediately follow it with because what other conclusion could they draw, or because what else did I leave them to do? Or you can say that happened, they did that, and then this is how I reacted to it. There's no judgment, there's no blaming, right? This is you getting clear on your role. This isn't to absolve them. I'm not saying that that company or that person or that whatever didn't do what they did. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you're only focusing here on what you can control. Yes, they had a role in it. And if I was talking to them, I would say the same thing. I'd say, leave this person out of it. Only talk about what you did. Because that's where the control is. That's where the power is. And that's where the momentum is for moving forward and getting out of your head, forgiving, breathing, bringing peace, and letting everything go. That's where the power is. So pause it right now, write that story, or tell it to somebody. This process is probably the one that I have used most often and most frequently in my life. I primarily use it in my personal life and my relationships, but I also use it in my business too. But it has shifted everything. Now, this is a practice. This is something that you get to be intentional about practicing. Don't get frustrated when you begin doing this. These are the 4 steps of accountability. I started laughing because I'm about to tell a story where I got really frustrated. But number 1, recognize that it is never about the other person. Now, what does the it in that sentence mean? It means the situation, the emotion that you're experiencing, the outcome, everything that is going on for you. It's not about them. It's not about them. Because if it is, then you're a victim and you're not in control. And then you're screwed and you're stuck. So in order to create momentum and actually take accountability and get control, you have to recognize that it's not about them. The reason I chuckle is because a couple of years ago I was helping my friend with this concrete job. So we were carrying these concrete panels, building a wall from the trailer right over to the job site. We're doing this, and I had 2 hours of doing this where I'm just picking these panels up, lift them, carry them over here. And I had gotten in an argument with my wife the night before. Shocker, right? Turns out that being in a relationship means that occasionally you have disagreements. That's part of the deal. I was stuck in victimhood. And I was like, okay, I'm frustrated. I'm going to go through the 4 steps of accountability. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to be awesome. Personal development. Yay, let's go. Let's do this. I was like, okay. Number 1, it's never about the other person. All right. But she actually did say that. How is this not about her? She did this. And so I get stuck. And I'm like, okay, stop it. Get another panel, pick it up. Number one, it's not about the other person. Okay. Now, what can I do? Number two, no, I can't. She actually said that. Are you kidding me? Like, what? Of course it's about her. And I did this for 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to get past number one. And you have to get past number one, because the rest of it, you'll see, is not going to be effective if you still are saying that it's about them, something that they needed to do differently, something that they messed up on or whatever. Like, yes, they did say that. Yes, they messed up on that. Yes, it happened, whatever. But if that's the thing that needs to change for you to be happy or to be successful, you cannot control whether or not that changes. And so you're stuck. And that's where I was. I was stuck because I kept making it about her, something that she needed to do, something that she needed to change, and I wasn't being accountable. So after 2 hours, I finally said, okay, oh my gosh, it's not about her. She has her own role, and I have my own role. Okay, I was able to separate it. Number two is, there's a lot to it, but number two is, how did I contribute to, create, react to, or allow this situation? Or what meaning did I attach to it? There's a lot to unpack there. But ask yourself, did I contribute to this? In what way? It's those questions that I had you answer before when you told the accountable version of your story. Did I create this? Did I actually create this? Yeah, maybe I did. Did I react to it? Or did I allow it? Sometimes you just allowed things to happen by not speaking up and owning your voice. Sometimes things happen and it's the meaning that you attach to it. So if somebody says something, somebody posts something, somebody whatever, and you make it mean something about you, and then you make decisions based on that because of the meaning that you've attached to it about yourself. So how did you contribute to it? How did you create it? How did you react to it, maybe afterwards? Or maybe how did you allow it into your life? Or what meaning did you attach to it? It's really important that you do this step. And it's going to be vulnerable, and recognize that this is they could do this too, but that's not what we're doing here. Again, I chuckle because I'm about to tell a story about this. After you get clear on what you did, what you didn't do, your energy, the things that you brought to it, the message you sent, the meaning that you attached to it, all that stuff, when you get clear on that, then you can go on to number 3, which is, what is my specific lesson? Based on the things that I learned in number 2, what's my lesson? Because I see what I did, what I didn't do, all that stuff, and then I have the results of that. What's my lesson? What is it that I can learn from this? Because you can go through something really, really painful and not learn a thing. It's really easy to do that. Intentionally learn something from it. And this is going to require you to swallow your pride and to then apply compassion to yourself. Now, after you recognize what your lesson is, then you go to number 4, which is, what am I committed to moving forward? I care so much less about what you want than what you are committed to. What actions are you going to take? What are you going to shift? What are you going to do moving forward? Because if you don't commit to something, then it's going to happen again. You'll be a victim again. You'll buy into your limitations. You'll argue for your limitations and your excuses moving forward. In this same situation, it's going to repeat, it's going to repeat, it's going to repeat, unless you commit to something moving forward. So recognize it's never about them. How did you create it or allow it? Or what meaning did you attach to it? What is your specific lesson? And then what are you committed to moving forward? When I started doing this, it really did shift things with my relationship. And then I started doing this, which is I would put a gold star on my forehead for being accountable, and I would go through the 4 steps, and then I would go to my wife and I would tell her, okay, here's my accountability, here's this is what I'm committed to do moving forward, da, da, da. And then I would be like, like, I wouldn't actually do that, but my energy was, okay, now what's your accountability? And if I am, and then if she says something, or energetically she's like, okay, thank you, or cool, or, and then she doesn't offer her own, and then I get frustrated, then I'm back to victimhood. I'm like, I was just accountable. It's your turn. No, that's not how this works. You be accountable and model it for everyone around you, and you get to take control. So don't become a victim to somebody else not accepting their accountability, because you can't control that. You cannot control if somebody else accepts their own accountability. Somebody else can choose to be a victim, and you have to be okay with it. That's life. It's frustrating as balls sometimes. But guess what? If you make yourself a conscious creator around it, you can lessen, and lessen the amount that it affects you. And it becomes less and less and less. And then it affects you so little that it's not even on your radar. And then you're like, okay, they can be a victim, and there's no judgment around that, and there's no making it mean something about me. It's just like, oh, okay, how's that working for you? I'm gonna go over here and do this. And it's something you get to intentionally practice. So I want you to go through this in any area of your life where there's any sort of friction in your business, in your relationships, in anything. Go through these 4 steps of accountability. You can do these in your head, or you can print them out and follow them and write them down. But I promise you that if you do this literally every single day, you will begin to develop a practice that will put you on a track to have your focus in the right area, right? And if your focus is in the right area, and your physiology is good, and your language is a language of increase, then that changes your state, because you're an accountable place of control and empowerment and momentum and movement, and then that controls your state. Your state controls your thoughts. Thoughts control your beliefs control your actions, and your actions control your results. And it's just this big, beautiful chain of amazingness in your life because you deserve it. And I'm so excited to see what you create with this. Let's take it to the next level.